Have you ever just felt completely swamped, by all the tech complexity, the constant information overload?
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Like those cookie banners that are just relentless, popping up on every single site.
Oh, don't get me started on those.
Or maybe if you're in programming, you get that feeling sometimes like you're just a CRU'd monkey.
Yeah, just shuffling data around, create, read, update, delete. It can feel a bit soul-crushing.
Exactly. And you wonder, did it have to get this complicated?
Well, that feeling, that sort of existential dread about complexity, that's something our subject today has spent his career fighting against.
Right. Today we're doing a deep dive into the thinking of David Heinemeier Hansson, DHH, as most people know him.
A really influential figure. Creator of Ruby on Rails, CTO at 37 Signals, Basecamp, hey, all that.
Plus a best-selling author and, weirdly enough, a race car driver, too.
He wears many hats, but his core philosophy, especially around tech, is incredibly consistent and, well, human-centric.
Often brilliant, sometimes pretty provocative, definitely insightful. So our mission here is to really unpack his views on programming, productivity, how to build things, even life itself. We want to see how he cuts through all that noise.
Yeah, looking at how he champions simplicity, developer happiness, and, making a real impact. We're drawing a lot from his conversation on the Lex Fridman podcast, among other sources you provided.
Okay, let's start near the beginning. DHH got into programming, maybe a bit later than some, and he talks about this real fondness for late 90s PHP. What was so great about that time?
It's fascinating how he describes it. He calls it the pinnacle of web developer ergonomics.
Ergonomics? How so?
The sheer immediacy of it. You'd write a simple PHP script, you'd use FTP file transfer protocol, just uploading the file.
Right, yeah, I remember that.
And bang, it was live. Instantly, you change the file, hit reload in the browser, and your change was there.
No complex build process, no containers, none of that.
Exactly, just a basic web server like Apache with a module called modfivap running. It was incredibly simple and direct, and he said this ease of use, this directness, created a kind of high.
A high.
Yeah, a feeling of power and productivity that he says he's been chasing ever since throughout his whole career.
Wow. And it's not just him looking back with rose-tinted glasses, right?
Really?
He mentions people still working this way.
Right. He points to people like Peter Levels, the indie hacker guy, still uses PHP, jQuery, simple tools like SQLite for his database, and runs successful one-person businesses.
So it proves it's still viable. It wasn't just a phase.
Exactly. It shows that simplicity can still work even today, which, makes you ask the next question.
Which is, if it was so good, why did we lose it? How did things get so complicated?
Yeah. DHH has strong opinions here. He laments that we just sort of handed over the keys, the control over developer experience, to what he calls the merchants of complexity.
Merchants of complexity.
Yeah.
I like that phrase. And this is where it gets really interesting, isn't it? He connects this to things we all hate, like those cookie banners.
He's blunt. He says something like, no one serious actually believes cookie banners do anything good for anyone. He sees them as just a symptom of this larger problem, this needless complexity layered on top of things.
And it connects back to that CRU'd monkey feeling, too.
Absolutely. He talks about the existential dread some programmers feel, that they're just doing this basic data entry, essentially, and maybe subconsciously overcomplicate their tools or processes to feel like they're doing something more substantial.
That's a heavy thought. Compensating for lack of impact with complexity.
Yeah. And he also points fingers, maybe more structurally, at large organizations. Places like Facebook, where jobs get sliced so thin.
Right, like his example of a front-end glob pipeline configurator.
Exactly, where making a simple web page suddenly requires coordinating multiple specialists instead of one person just being able to do it.
Okay, so if PHP offered that initial high and things got complex, where did he find an antidote? This leads us to Ruby, right?
Yes, absolutely. After PHP, he discovered Ruby, and he said he just fell in love. He described it as fitting his brain like a perfect tailored glove.
What made it fit so well?
It boils down to the core philosophy. Ruby's creator, Yukihiro Matsumoto, or Mats, explicitly prioritized programmer happiness, the sheer joy of writing and reading the code.
Happiness is a design goal. That's pretty unusual.
It really is. And DHH loves to contrast this with, say, James Gosling, who designed Java. DHH paints Gosling as seeing programmers as Stupid creatures who needed to be constrained in rigid sandboxes.
Oh, so
Yeah. Ruby, though, aims for a more natural, almost English-like syntax. Often no semicolons needed at the end of lines, which cleans things up. And you can do cool things like call methods directly on numbers, like 5 times to do something 5 times.
makes the code cleaner, more expressive.
Beautiful and succinct, yeah. It's about making the interaction with the language itself pleasant. And he argues that this isn't just fluff. Happy programmers are more productive, more creative. It's a performance metric in itself.
Okay, so that's the base language. But then Rails builds on top of that with things like metaprogramming and these domain-specific languages, DSLs, like 5.days or have many.comments. How does that amplify the happiness factor?
Right, that's where Rails really shines. Metaprogramming lets Rails essentially add new keywords and abilities to Ruby itself dynamically.
So it extends the language for the web domain.
Exactly. It allows Rails to create these DSLs that read almost like plain English. 5.days is a perfect example. It feels natural. Has many.comments clearly states a relationship. This drastically cuts down on what developers call line noise.
Line noise.
Yeah, like boilerplate code, syntax clutter, stuff that doesn't add meaning, but you just have to type. Active record is probably the prime example.
That's the database interaction part of Rails.
Correct. It's often called the crown jewel. It lets you define how your application talks to the database using incredibly readable code. Like you might literally write class project application record, then belongs to that account and has many participants. It's almost self-documenting.
I can see how that would feel good to write and read. Now, one area DHH is really passionate, almost militant about, is dynamic typing in Ruby. He calls it the bedrock. Why is that such a big deal for him?
Yeah, he's a huge defender. He basically argues that static typing, where you have to declare the type of every variable up front and the compiler checks it, just adds ugliness and a lot of extra boilerplate code you have to write.
So he prefers dynamic typing, sometimes called duck typing.
Exactly. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. The type isn't as important as what the object can do. He thinks for most web applications, this is way more flexible and productive.
But what about errors? Static typing fans say it catches bugs early.
He acknowledges that, but argues that most logical bugs, the really tricky ones, aren't caught by static types anyway. You need good tests for those, unit tests, immigration tests.
So testing over static types.
For the kinds of applications he builds, yes. He does concede that maybe if you're Google, with millions and millions of lines of code, the equation might change. But he really pushes back against the idea that what works for Google should automatically be the default for a startup or a small team.
That makes sense. Context matters.
Right.
This actually leads nicely into another common criticism you hear about Ruby, that it doesn't scale.
Ah, yes, the scaling myth. He tackles this head on. His prime example is Shopify.
Right, the e-commerce giant.
Huge platform, handles millions of requests, powers something like 30% of all e-commerce, and it's built on Ruby on Rails. They've even contributed back significantly to Ruby itself, like with YJIT.
YJAT.
Yeah, it's a new, faster, just-in-time compiler for Ruby that Shopify developed and open-sourced. It significantly boosts Ruby's performance, further undermining that old Ruby is slow argument.
So the scaling argument is kind of outdated.
DH would argue it often misses the point anyway. He says the real bottleneck, the real cost in software, isn't usually CPU cycles, it's wet cores.
Wet cores,
Yeah.
meaning human brains.
Exactly. Human productivity, programmer time and focus. That's
Oh.
the expensive resource, which is why he's so interested in AI's potential, by the way. Anything that can boost that human productivity is huge.
Interesting. And related to this focus on productivity and simplicity, he's also a big fan of monoliths,
Right.
Not microservices.
Very much so. He thinks splitting applications into tiny microservices too early is a massive complexity-inducing mistake for most teams.
Why is that? Microservices are trendy.
Because, he argues, you turn simple function calls within your code into complex network calls between services. Suddenly, you need service discovery, distributed tracing, complex deployment orchestration. It adds immense overhead.
So keep it simple, keep it together, unless you have a very good reason not to.
Precisely. He even calls the common practice of splitting web development into separate front-end and back-end teams a crime against web development.
Wow, strong words.
Yeah, he points to, hey, their email service. It runs on something like 40 kilobytes of JavaScript. Compare that to Gmail, which he says is like 28 megabytes. Keeping front and back integrated allows for that kind of efficiency.
Okay, so these ideas, programmer happiness, convention over configuration, monoliths, they didn't just happen. DHH actually codified them in the Rails doctrine back in 2012.
He did, yeah. It was a way to articulate the guiding principles behind Rails for the community.
Let's touch on a few key ones. We mentioned optimizing for programmer happiness.
Right, that's central, which includes things like allowing ambiguity where it's natural, like letting you type exit or quit to leave a command prompt because humans might use either. It also ties into the principle of least surprise. Things should generally work the way you intuitively expect them to.
And then there's convention over configuration. That sounds super practical.
Hugely practical. The idea is Rails comes pre-configured with sensible defaults for almost everything. You don't have to make a million tiny decisions just to get started.
So you follow the conventions, and you can focus on your actual application logic.
Exactly. It lets you focus on what's unique and important about your app, not reinventing the wheel on basic setup. This connects to another principle. The menu is omakase.
Omakase, like a sushi restaurant.
Yeah.
Chef's choice.
Precisely. Rails aims to be a complete, integrated system where the parts are designed to work beautifully together. It's not a buffet where you have to pick every single ingredient like you often do in the JavaScript world, trying to make disparate libraries work together. Rails gives you the curated meal.
What about provide sharp knives? That sounds a bit dangerous.
Yeah. It means trusting developers, giving them powerful tools, even if those tools could be misused, like you could cut yourself with a sharp knife. It's about empowering developers, not restricting them excessively.
And the soft ramp to infinity.
That means it should be easy to get started with Rails, the soft ramp, but there should always be more to learn, more depth to explore the infinity. It keeps developers engaged over the long term.
It's interesting, he also mentioned he might rephrase progress over stability today.
Yeah, that was a reflection on his own evolution. Seeing the constant churn and breaking changes in other ecosystems, like JavaScript, made him appreciate the value of stability more over time. Maybe considered progress alongside stability would be more accurate now.
Makes sense. Okay, shifting gears slightly AI, it's transforming everything, including programming. How does DHH view working with AI tools?
He is quite enthusiastic, actually. He says he loves using tools like ChatGPT for explaining concepts, getting a second opinion on code, or even drafting initial versions of functions or tests.
So he sees it as a collaborator.
Definitely. But, and this is a big but, for him the AI must generate code that is human-readable and human-interpretable.
Not just code that works, but code that makes sense to a person.
Exactly. He really pushes back against the idea of AI generating super optimized but completely unreadable code. He calls it Perl golf code that's clever and short but impossible to maintain.
Okay, readable code is key. But he also voiced a concern about something he called competence training, right?
Yes, this is a really interesting point. He worries that if AI does too much of the typing, the actual writing of the code, developers might lose the deeper understanding that comes from that physical act.
How so?
He compares it to learning guitar. You don't learn just by listening or telling it an AI play C chord. You learn by putting your fingers on the frets, by doing it. Typing code, he argues, helps embed the patterns and logic in your brain.
So there's a risk of vibe coding. Just telling the AI the vibe and tweaking the output.
Yeah, he worries it could lead to a shallower understanding, even if it makes some tasks faster or empowers non-programmers, which he sees as a potential upside too. It leads him to this bigger philosophical point.
Which is?
Facing nobody knows anything about where this is all truly heading. Skills that are highly valued today might become niche hobbies tomorrow. Like, horse riding used to be essential transport, now it's largely recreational. Programming could potentially go that way.
A humbling thought. Now, another big move DHH made that really went against the grain was pulling 37 signals out of the cloud. Why on earth would they do that?
It started, quite simply, with the bill. Their AWS bill peaked at something like $3.2 to $3.4 million a year.
Wow. That's a lot.
It's a huge amount. And DHH started questioning the whole premise. The cloud was sold as easier, cheaper, faster, but for their stable, predictable workloads, it just wasn't cheaper.
Especially when AWS has pretty high profit margins.
Exactly. He pointed out AWS operates at like a 40% margin. So 37 Signals was paying a massive premium for convenience they maybe didn't need anymore.
Okay, so they moved off AWS. What did that actually mean for them? Did costs go down? Do they have to hire a bunch of server admins?
Costs went way down. They cut their infrastructure spending by 50 to 66%. And crucially, they did it without hiring extra operations staff.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't running your own servers incredibly complex?
DHH argues it's become much more feasible than people think. Buying powerful servers is relatively cheap, internet connections are fast. He even talks about home labbing people running significant setups from home.
So the expertise is out there.
He believes so. Running Linux servers isn't some arcane magic. It's a skill many people have, or that teams can relearn. There are definitely trade-offs and pain points, he admits, but for them, the cost savings and control were worth it.
Fascinating. It really challenges the cloud is always the answer narrative. Beyond the tech stack, DHH also has very strong views on how work itself should be structured.
Small teams, right?
And he's famously not a fan of engineering managers.
Oh, yeah, he's very outspoken on this. He generally believes managers often create more problems, bureaucracy, meetings, status reports than they solve.
So how should it work instead?
He champions tiny, highly skilled, autonomous teams. Think like the original id Software making Doom, or the small team that initially built Gmail. Minimal oversight, maximum focus.
And at 37 signals, what does that look like?
The default team size for a new feature or project is just 2 people, 1 programmer, 1 designer. That's it.
2 people. How do they build anything significant?
By focusing intensely, working deeply, and avoiding endless meetings and coordination overhead. He argues this is incredibly productive. Remember, Basecamp itself was initially built by DHH alone in about 400 hours, and it's generated hundreds of millions since.
Wow. That focus on small teams and deep work also ties into his views on growth and, like, the typical tech endgame, right? He's not aiming for Mojito Island.
Not at all. Firstly, his refusal to take venture capital is key. That lets them resist the pressure to grow at all costs or chase an exit.
They stay in control.
Exactly. And he argues that the whole retire early to a beach dream Mojito Island is kind of a mirage, especially for ambitious, creative people.
Why a mirage?
Because he believes true satisfaction for people like him comes from being engaged, from tackling challenges, from achieving flow, that state of deep immersion Csikszentmihalyi wrote about. Sitting on a beach gets boring fast if you're wired to build and create.
So the work itself is the reward, in a way.
To a large extent, yes. Finding joy and meaning in the process. And he also emphasizes his family life as crucial, providing structure and grounding, which he feels paradoxically boosts his productivity during his focused 40-hour work week. It prevents the founder loneliness trap, too.
It's a very integrated view of work and life.
Yeah.
Let's talk about open source, too. Ruby on Rails itself is a massive open source project. How does DHH view the open source world?
His view is interesting. He doesn't see it as inherently democratic. He sees successful projects as often being meritocratic, frequently guided by a strong lead, a benevolent dictator, as the term goes.
So not committee-driven.
Not usually, no. And his core philosophy is that open source is fundamentally a gift. It's given freely without obligation attached.
Which explains his famous, slightly aggressive slide.
Fuck you slide, yeah. It wasn't meant just to be offensive, but to make a point. He built Rails primarily for his own needs at Basecamp. If others found it useful, great, that's the gift. But that doesn't give them the right to make demands or feel entitled.
It's a clear boundary. This is a gift, not a product you paid for with support expectations.
Exactly. And this framework allows open source to coexist peacefully with commercial software, where you do have licenses, contracts, and clear expectations of reliability and support.
This whole gift economy idea was central to a recent controversy he waded into involving WordPress, right?
Yes. The situation with Matt Mullenweg, WordPress's founder, and the hosting company WP Engine.
What was DHH's take there?
He was highly critical of Mullenweg. From DHH's perspective, Mullenweg was trying to essentially demand payment or concessions from WP Engine after having given WordPress away as an open source gift for years.
So violating the gift principle.
That's how DHH saw it. He argued it undermines the fundamental trust that businesses need to build on open source software. If the creator can retroactively try to charge or impose demands, it breaks the model. He compared it to Apple's 30% App Store fee changing the terms after people are locked in.
Even if Mullenweg had legitimate grievances.
DHH argued that personal disputes shouldn't risk damaging the decades of established ethics and trust that make the entire open source ecosystem function. The gift principle has to be respected, in his view.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground here. We've really dived into DHH's world, his technical choices, his philosophy on work, his principles.
Yeah, it's this unique mix, isn't it? Deep technical skill, but always connected to these broader philosophical ideas about simplicity, happiness, and focus.
From making code beautiful and human-centric with Rails, to championing lean teams, even pulling out of the cloud and finding that joy and flow, It really challenges a lot of the standard tech industry playbook.
It absolutely does. It offers a different kind of roadmap, maybe a more sustainable one for some people for building a career and maybe even a life in this field.
So thinking about all this, what's the takeaway for you listening right now? DHH and his partner Jason Fried wrote in their book, Rework, something like, what you do is what matters, not what you think or say or plan.
Action over intention.
So the final thought to leave you with is, reflecting on DHH's journey and ideas, what concrete actions might you take to chase your own version of that PHP high, to simplify your work, find your own flow, and make your impact no matter how the tech landscape keeps changing?